Before we dive in, let me ask you something personal. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. I love seeing our little community from all over the country come together now. Let me take you into a night I never expected to remember. So vividly, a night where something shifted in the quiet hours of a hotel room. A night that still lingers in my thoughts. My name is Lisa. I'm 73, but I've always felt like age is just a number. I don't think we ever stop learning, growing, or being surprised by life, especially when you least expect it. This story happened last spring, when my husband Richard was away on a veterans retreat. He goes every year and I usually stay behind. But this time things unfolded a little differently. My grandson Charles Hayes, 28, had invited me to go with him on a weekend work trip to a coastal town a few hours from where we live. He had business during the day, and I got a change of scenery, something to shake up my usual routine. Honestly, it sounded lovely. We checked into a modest little hotel, one of those places with soft yellow walls and too much air freshener, nothing fancy. But the staff were kind and the place was quiet, which I appreciated more than I realized. We'd only booked one room with 2 beds. I didn't mind him, not high maintenance, and Charles was always respectful and sweet. We'd been close since he was a boy. I practically helped raise him when my daughter had to work long shifts. Hayes got this calm energy about him, quiet but observant, and he always makes me feel safe even when I don't realize I need it. That first night, after a small dinner at a seafood shack by the water, we returned to the hotel, both of us tired from the drive. The room smelled faintly of ocean salt and that standard hotel linen scent. The lamp between our beds cast a warm, soft glow, and we each slipped into our beds in comfortable silence. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slowly, listening to the rhythmic whir of its blades. Something felt different. Not in a bad way, just quieter than usual, more still. "You okay?" Grandma Charles' voice came gently from the other bed. I smiled into the dark. "Yeah, I'm fine, just can't sleep." He chuckled. "Same, maybe too much coffee at dinner." I turned onto my side to face him, even though I couldn't see him clearly. "Do you ever feel like time's speeding up the older you get?" He paused. "Yeah, I think about that a lot, actually." I blinked, and my 20s are almost over. I reached for the lamp chain and pulled at the room. Dimmed to a faint glow from the window, moonlight spilled in, laying quiet stripes across the floor. "When I was your age," I said softly, "I used to think I had everything figured out, marriage, family plans, but life's full of surprises." He was quiet again, listening. I always loved that about him, how he didn't interrupt or rush to reply. "I've been thinking about you lately," I admitted, voice low. "You've grown into such a thoughtful man, kind, steady. Your mother would be proud." "Thanks," he said quietly. "Means a lot coming from you." We fell into silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was thick with unspoken things, with memories and time and all the layers between us. A soft thunder rolled in the distance. I hadn't realized rain was coming, but it felt fitting. The kind of night where the air hums with something just below the surface. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Do you ever feel lonely even when you're not alone?" I blinked. That hit me deeper than I expected. "Yes," I said, more than I admit to. "Anyone?" He shifted in his bed, then sat up. The room brightened slightly as his silhouette moved against the curtains. "I guess I've always felt closest to you." He said, "You've been more of a mother to me than anyone." I never really said that out loud. I sat up too, wrapping the blanket around my shoulders. My heart beat a little faster. "You don't need to say it. I've always known." The room felt smaller now, not in a bad way, just more intimate, like the walls were listening. Charles stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the rain, now tapping gently against the glass. "You've always understood me," he said, not turning around even when I didn't say a word. I stood too, stepping quietly beside him. The rain streaked the glass in lazy trails, lit up by the occasional passing car's headlights. "You're easy to understand," I said. "You just don't let many people try." He finally looked at me. Then there was something in his eyes, not sadness, not longing, but something tender, grateful you're the only person I feel real around, he said, like I don't have to pretend. The strange warmth bloomed in my chest, not inappropriate, not uncomfortable, just a quiet recognition of connection, of something deeper than titles or roles. I reached out, resting my hand gently on his arm. You never have to pretend with me. We stood there for a long time, no rush, no pressure, just the rain, the silence, and something gently shifting in the space between us. And though nothing more happened that night, something changed. Something important, and it was only the beginning. The next morning the rain had passed, leaving the pavement outside damp and shimmering in the early sun. I opened the curtains, slowly letting the golden light spill into the room while Charles was still asleep in the other bed. He lay on his side, peaceful like the boy I used to read bedtime stories to, only now he was a man, and the weight of years between us felt strangely light. I got dressed quietly and went downstairs to the hotel cafe. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and toasted bread filled the air, comforting in a familiar, ordinary way. I sat near the window, sipping from a white porcelain cup, but my mind kept drifting back to the night before, not to anything dramatic or scandalous, but to the quiet intensity of that conversation, the way he looked at me, the way I felt seen. When Charles joined me a little later, he smiled, that soft, sheepish smile of his sleep. Okay. I nodded eventually. Yeah, it helped talking like that. He stirred, his coffee eyes fixed on the swirling cream. I don't open up like that with many people I know, I said gently. That's why it meant something. We didn't say more, but something in the air between youth had changed, not tense, just a new kind of closeness, like something invisible had softened. And we both felt it. After breakfast we took a slow walk along the marina, the sun warming our backs. The boats rocked gently in their slips, and the breeze carried the scent of salt and seagrass. Charles told me about his work, the pressure, the deadlines, the subtle loneliness of always feeling like he had to be the strong one. You'd think by now I'd have someone, he admitted, a partner, someone to share this with. I glanced at him. You have more time than you think. Besides, not everyone finds connection the traditional way. He gave me a curious look. You believe that? I smiled. I've lived long enough to know love doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes it shows up where you least expect it. There was a silence as we walked, a thoughtful kind, and I saw the way his fingers twitched at his side, like he wanted to reach out, and didn't. I didn't either, not then. We were still figuring out what this new closeness was, what it meant. Back at the hotel we rested for a bit in the afternoon. I sat on the edge of my bed reading, while Charles lay back, eyes closed, one arm resting across his forehead. Tell me something about your past, he said suddenly. Something no one knows. I looked up from the book, surprised why he smiled without opening his eyes. Because I want to know all of you, not just the grandmother version. That line touched something deep in me. All right, I said, placing the book down. When I was 21, I almost ran away to Paris with a man I'd known only a week. He was wild and charming, and I think I wanted to be someone else back then. What stopped you? He asked. I realized I didn't need to be someone else. I just needed to be seen. But I didn't understand that until much later. He opened his eyes and looked at me. I see you, Lisa. Not as a role, not as a title, just you. I felt my breath catch, not from shock, from something warmer, deeper. A part of me that had gone untouched for years stirred. Quietly that evening we stayed in the room, ordered a light dinner, watched the rain return in soft, steady sheets. We didn't talk much, not with words, but the space between us was full. He lay on one bed, and I on the other, both of us watching the muted television, pretending to pay attention. At one point he stood and walked over to the small kitchenette to grab water. The soft lamp above him made his features look older, more weathered, and something in his gaze lingered as he turned back toward me. You always wear your hair the same, he said. I laughed. Habit. Why? No reason, just I like it. It's very you. He handed me the glass and sat beside me on my bed for a moment, not saying a word. The bed dipped under his weight, and our shoulders brushed just enough to send a quiet shiver down my spine. I'm glad you came with me, he said, his voice low. I didn't know how much I needed this, so did I said sometimes we don't realize what we're missing until we're sitting right next to it. He looked at me, then really looked, and for a moment time stopped. There was a gravity in his eyes, not demanding or invasive, just present a connection. You can't plan for the kind that grows slowly with care. I didn't look away, neither did he. And though neither of us moved, neither of us touched, something passed between us, quiet and profound, like two parts recognizing they belong to the same story. Even if the world might not understand the pages. We both turned back toward the flickering screen. But we weren't watching it, we were listening. To something else, something inside. And it was still unfolding. The next morning I woke before the sun, wrapped in the quiet stillness of our room. The light outside was still a dark blue, the kind of early hour that holds a certain honesty. I sat up in bed and watched Charles sleep across the room, his chest rising and falling in a slow, calm rhythm. I don't know how long I sat like that, still quiet. But something in that moment made me feel like I was standing at the edge of a truth I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't sure what it was exactly, a warmth, maybe, or a longing that didn't have a name yet. When Charles stirred and finally opened his eyes, he smiled at me, not groggy, not forced, just soft and familiar. Morning, he said softly. Good morning. I replied, keeping my voice light. We didn't say much as we got ready. He had a late breakfast meeting with some local business partners, and I told him I'd stay in, maybe take a walk down by the water later. He hesitated before he left, like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He just smiled again and said, "See you in a bit," when the door closed behind him. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I stood at the window for a long time, watching the cars drift by, people living their lives. Like nothing was different, but I was different. Something had opened inside me, something I hadn't expected, and I needed time to understand it. I walked to the marina alone that afternoon, letting the sea breeze play with my hair. I sat on a bench with a view of the open water and thought about my life, about Richard, about the years of routine and quiet love, and the loneliness that had slowly crept in like fog. I loved my husband in the way long married people love each other deeply, that there were parts of me that had been asleep for so long I forgot they were even there. And now here they were, awake. Later that evening, Charles returned to the room. He looked tired but lighter somehow. He kicked off his shoes and dropped onto the bed with a sigh. "How was your day?" he asked, eyes closed. "Peaceful," I said, thoughtful. He smiled without opening his eyes. Same. For a while we just sat in that companionable silence. Then he sat up suddenly and said, "Can we talk about last night?" I felt a small jolt in my chest. Of course. He turned toward me, his expression serious but not tense. I've been thinking about it all day, not in a strange way, just I felt something like we crossed a line, but not a bad one. More like we walked into a space we'd both been avoiding. I nodded slowly. I felt it too. It wasn't just a conversation, he said. It was something else, something I've never felt before, not with anyone. His words weren't reckless. They were careful, respectful. And that's what made them land so deeply. "Neither have I," I admitted. He looked at me then with that same tenderness, the one that didn't judge or rush, the kind that listens even when no one is speaking. "I know how it sounds," he said, "and I know how the world would see it. But I also know this, whatever this is, it feels real and safe and honest." A lump rose in my throat, not from shame, not from confusion, from the simple relief of being understood. "I don't want to overstep," he added. "I just needed to tell you." I reached out and took his hand gently, carefully. "You didn't overstep, Charles, you just spoke what I've been feeling too." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for hours. "So what do we do with this?" I didn't answer right away. I looked down at our hands. Mine wrinkled, his strong and warm, and thought about how rare this kind of connection was. Not forbidden, not scandalous, just unexpected and undeniable. "I think we give it space," I said finally. "Let it be what it is without forcing it into a shape that doesn't fit. We don't need to define it, we just need to be honest and kind." His fingers curled around mine slightly. "I can do that. I want to." That night, we didn't pretend anymore. We sat side by side on the bed watching a movie. We barely paid attention to our shoulders, touched our hands, stayed clasped. There was no rush, no agenda, just presence. When it came time to sleep, he looked at me and asked, would it be strange if I stayed here in this bed just to sleep? I knew what he meant. He wasn't asking for anything more than closeness, just the comfort of not feeling alone. No, I said. It wouldn't be strange. So he climbed under the covers beside me, and we lay there back to back at first, like two people easing into a new language. Eventually I felt his hand slide gently over mine again, and I didn't pull away the silence between. US was full with questions, with understanding, with a connection neither of us could explain. And in that room under soft lamplight and the steady hum of the heater, I felt more alive than I had in years, not because of romance, not because of rules broken or boundaries crossed, but because someone had seen me, all of me, and I had let them. Morning sunlight pushed softly through the beige hotel curtains, warming the edges of the bed. Before I even opened my eyes, I was still lying beside Charles. Though now we were separated by a few respectful inches, our bodies turned slightly inward, like two people who had reached the end of a very long conversation and were content to stay in the silence. My eyes fluttered open first for a moment. Forgot where I was, that in the quiet of the room, there was no husband in the next room, no daily routine to rush toward. Just me, my thoughts, and the soft rhythm of Charles' breath beside me. I turned my head and looked at him. His face was relaxed. Even serene, he looked younger somehow, as if had slept off a burden that had been weighing him down for years, and strangely enough, I felt the same when he stirred. His eyes met mine almost immediately. No surprise, no awkwardness, just an unspoken acknowledgement of what we'd shared. Morning, he said softly. Good morning. I replied. We lay there for a moment longer, before he slowly sat up and stretched. I think that might have been the best sleep I've had in months. I smiled. Same here. We both got up and started moving about the room, gathering our things. It was checkout day. The weekend had gone by faster than I expected, and yet I felt like we'd lived a whole year in those 2 nights. As we packed our movements with gentle thoughtful, there were no big declarations, no need to label or explain what had happened. Instead, there was a quiet grace to everything, like we had come through something rare together. I've been thinking, Charles said, as he zipped his duffel bag, about how we move forward from this, how we carry it. I looked up from my suitcase. Me too. I don't want to lose what we found, he said, voice steady, but I also know life's not simple. We go back home, we return to our lives. But I want to keep this, the honesty, the closeness, alive. I nodded. We will, because it's real, and because we both know the difference between something that's fleeting and something that matters. He smiled, and I saw a bit of the boy he used to be in that moment, vulnerable, open, trusting, and I felt proud, not just of him, but of the space we'd created together, a space where we could be fully ourselves, without masks, without fear. The drive home was mostly quiet. Soft music played from the radio, and the road stretched long and empty ahead. At one point, Charles reached over and gently placed his hand over mine, resting it on the center console. I didn't say a word. I just turned my hand over and held his back. We didn't need to fill the silence. It was full already, with memory, with understanding, with something lasting. When we pulled up to my house, I felt a strange ache in my chest, not regret, not sadness, just the realization that something beautiful was about to shift again. We had stepped into a new chapter of our relationship, and though it would take a different shape once we returned to the world, it would still be there, quiet and enduring. Charles turned off the engine and looked at me. Are you okay? He asked. I smiled and reached up, brushing a piece of hair behind his ear, like I used to when he was little more than okay. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, his hand still resting in mine. Thank you for everything, for coming, for seeing me. And thank you, I said, my voice quiet, for reminding me that I'm still here, that there are parts of me I haven't lost, just forgotten. He helped me with my bags, and I watched as he drove off down the road, his car shrinking into the distance. When I stepped inside my home, everything looked the same. The photos on the mantel, the worn cushions on the couch, the ticking of the old wall clock, but I was different. I walked through the quiet house, touched the kitchen counter, the edges of old furniture, and felt them differently, like they were meeting me for the first time again. That evening, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my favorite chair by the window. The sky was streaked with orange and lavender, and for once, I didn't feel alone, not in the way I used to, because now there was something inside me that had been rekindled. A quiet truth, a connection that had nothing to do with rules or expectations, and everything to do with seeing and being seen, with choosing presence over pretense. And though I knew life would move forward just as it always does, I also knew I'd never forget that hotel room, that rainy night, that soft breath of something new between us. It had changed me forever.